योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिमानतोऽस्मि। लये सम्बोधयेच्चित्तं विक्षिप्तं शमयेत् पुनः सकाशायं विजानीयात् समप्राप्तं न चालयेत्. Om. So in the last class, I've been a little irregular in the last couple of weeks. So whenever the last class was, so we looked at the drashta, that is the seer. So whenever we use the word drashta, the seer, obviously it says that there must be a scene, that is the drishyam. So there is a seer drashta, there is a scene drishya. So what is the purpose of drashta for the drishya, and what is the purpose of the drishya for the drashta? Now as far as the drishya, the world is concerned, since it is inert, it does not even recognize the existence of a drashta, the seer, isn't it? So this is an important point because we think that the world is somehow sentient, and that sentiency of the world is causing us sukha dukkha. So if the world has to cause any sukha dukkha, then it must be recognizing the seer. But this world is actually, the whole world is being inert. It really does not have any interest in the drashta. But conversely, the drashta has got interest in the drishya. So if drishya has no interest in drashta, then why should drishya be there at all? See how, if we think a little deeply, serious problems arise in our understanding. So drishya is there because there is drashta. Why should drishya be there? It is because the only way that the drashta, the seer, can either enjoy, which is bhoga, or can liberate himself, which is apavarga, drishya is inevitable. And therefore, Ishvara creates a drishya. It is something similar to, let us say, a new movie comes to town. When the new movie comes to town, the theater will actually screen the movie. The theater, the screen, has no interest in a particular viewer, isn't it? It is not made for one particular viewer or one group of particular viewers. So, but when it comes, the movie runs. What does the movie do? The movie will simply running. It will run as long as there are viewers. The moment that the viewers are absent, movie is taken off by the theater. Now, some people have seen the movie, and those people will never go back to watch the same movie. But the movie will be continued to screen. Why? For the sake of those people who have not seen the movie. So though this example is very simple, this makes us understand this next sutra, that is, the theater will continue to run for those who have not seen the movie. And they will come and buy the tickets. So one movie, many viewers. Similarly, one world, one drishya, many purushas. So now you see, that is why in the Yoga Sutra, metaphysics, there is multiple Purushas, as many Purushas as there are living beings. Living beings means that the jiva is there even after the one mortal body dies, it will assume another mortal body. So, in other words, as long as the jiva is there, drishya is required. Even that means even though for a person who has already seen the movie, that movie is irrelevant. Because others are there who would be watching the movie, the theater will continue to run the show. This is what is the essence of the next sutra we have to study, sutra number 22 of the chapter 2. Kritartham prati nashtamapi anashtam tadanya sadharanatvat. Kritartha means krita artha. So what is the main purpose of human existence? Even according to Yoga Shastra, it is for the sake of liberation. It uses the word apavarga, for the sake of liberation, kritartha. So for him, that is prati, means for the liberated person, drishya relationship ceases. For a person who is liberated, the world's existence or otherwise is immaterial. Why? Remember in the last class we saw what is the purpose of the drishya. The purpose of the drishya is twofold. One is bhoga or enjoyment, another is apavarga or liberation. It is only for those two purposes the world exists. And for the one who has achieved liberation, for him the world is immaterial. Kritartham prati nashtam. When it relates to the one who has achieved liberation, the world is immaterial. Drishya prapancha is immaterial. This is exactly what Sitaramaya Garu was pointing in his text to me. He quoted one of the names of Shiva in the 108 names of Shiva Ashtottara, Apavarga Pradaya Namaha. Shiva is the one who gives Apavarga Prada. So Apavarga Prada means what? One who knows Shiva. In the context of Yoga Sutra, one who knows Shiva is one who knows the Purusha. One who has established in the Purusha. We saw that in the first chapter itself, Tada Drishta Swarupe Avasthanam, establishing in one's own self. And that is Shiva. Shvetashatra Upanishad also says, Jnatva Shivam Shantim Atyantameti. One who knows Shiva will get the ultimate peace. One who knows the Purusha gets kaivalya or aloneness or ultimate peace, even according to Yoga Shastra. But for enjoyment, the world is required. So therefore, for the liberated one, for him, also drishya is required until he is liberated. Because liberated means from what are you going to be liberated? You have to be liberated from confusion. And this is again what Shvetashatra Upanishad has taken place. In Hamsaha, that means a jiva, Brahmyate Brahmachakre, in the wheel of time, in the wheel of Brahman, this jiva is roaming about relentlessly, cannot get out of the trap of this world. And to get out of this, the only way is for the apavarga, even to get out of this mess, we have to know what this mess is. And therefore it becomes important to understand the nature of drishya, even though the drishya is indifferent to the drashta. So for him who flies off of this chakra, Brahma chakra, for him, by knowing Jnatva Shivam, by knowing Shiva, by knowing the Purusha, then just as the one who has already seen the movie, whether the movie is running in a theater or not is immaterial to one who has seen the movie. Like that, for a person who is liberated, he becomes impervious of the existence of the world. So then, kritartham prati nashtam. the sutra says, Nashtam means something ceased. So what exactly ceased? What exactly stopped? What is it that the Kritartha stopped? For him, look at even a Jivan Mukta, a person who is still alive but who has understood what this Shiva, what this self is. For him, the 5 elements are there, isn't it? The Panchabhutas are still there. A Paramayogi, Adi Shankaracharya, until he died, the world, he was engaged in the world, even though he was a Jivan Mukta. And he still had transactions through Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha, also known as Tanmatras. That was there. You see, there is the teacher, says Pippalada sits there in Prashnopanishad, a student will come and ask a question. Bharadwaja will come and ask a question. For as far as Pippalada is concerned, the world is immaterial. But for Bharadwaja, the student who comes and asks a question, that question is heard by the teacher, the question is processed, and the question is answered. So there is a questioner, means prapancha is there. So kritartham prati nashtam, for the one who has achieved the liberation, the world ceases to exist. It becomes difficult for us to parse because even the Jivan Mukta is reacting with the world. So that means the world has not disappeared for him. So what disappeared? Panchabhutas are there. The transactional vehicles, that is Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasagandha, that is there. This person is alive. His sense organs are there. His senses are there. His antahkarana, manas, buddhi, chitta, ahankara is there. Manas, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, sense organs, sense, and then the jiva, the communicating vehicles, Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasagandha, the tanmatras and the panchabhutas exist. And that is the definition of the world, of the drishya. So what did go? What went away is the predominance of trigunas. That is what disappeared. The link, that which transports panchabhutas, tanmatras, sense organs, senses, antahkarana, sukha, dukkha, shita, ushna, all of them are put into perspective by the trigunas. And that is what makes us suffer or enjoy. Sukha dukkha. So for a kritartha, what happens, even though all of these are there, he is beyond the bondage of the trigunas. This is what Gitacharya also meant, Nistrayigunyo Bhavarjuna. You become free from the trigunas. Just because a person is liberated, we should not misunderstand this sutra by saying the world disappears. The world does not disappear, it will continue to be there, but the kritartha is not confused because the prism, I also mentioned about the prism of trigunas, will not distort the images. So this person has actually, what he has done is, he has disabled the influence of the Prakriti, the predominance of the Prakriti. So the next question that the Yoga Sutra takes up is, okay, that's all fine, but why in the very first place the drashta, the seer, is conjoined with the drishya samyoga? See, I did not choose to get into contact with this world. I was thrown into this world. This drashta was thrown into the world. And the drishya existed. And I could have been left alone without making me come into contact with the world through Trigunas. World was there, but why introduce Trigunas? What is this pleasure that Ishvara gets by creating this samyoga? Why should he do that? This is also a fundamental philosophical question. Why I even took birth if the life is full of dualities of Shita, Ushna, Sukha, Dukkha? Then we give a convoluted, a long-winded answer of karma and karma phala and all that. But here you will see a beautiful explanation by Patanjali Maharshi why the two things come together. See Sutra number 23, Swaswami Shaktyoho Swarupopalabdhi Hetuhu Samyogaha. Swaswami Shaktyoho Swarupopalabdhi Hetuhu Samyogaha. In brevity and crispness, we cannot, we cannot fail to admire the brilliance of Patanjali. Now this conjunction, samyoga, this samyoga of the seen, that is drishya, and the seer, the drashta. And these two, for what purpose they come together? For the drashta to discover his true nature. Now you see, suddenly you realize the immense amount of compassion on the part of Ishvara. If the drishya was not there, the seer drashta would never have had an opportunity to experience the freedom. He would be ever bound. And therefore, for the drashta to discover his true nature, drishyam has been created. In other words, if the world is not there at all, suppose the world is not there at all, the seer would have had no way to know his own nature. Unless the piece of gold is rubbed on the touchstone, how do we know the quality of gold? It could be an imitation. So the touchstone for the maturity of a jiva is the universe. That is why we have to respect the universe, because it is where we can put into practice what we have learned and test it. Stress test of our knowledge can be done only when there is the prapancha. Now let us see. Purusha has a power. What is his power? Consciousness. What is consciousness? He can recognize, he can identify, he can actually illumine an object. Prakriti also has a power. What is the power of the Prakriti? The power of the Prakriti is to contact. The sense objects are there, part of Prakriti. I have the sense organs, part of Prakriti. I have the senses, part of Prakriti. Then I have the buddhi, part of Prakriti. So up to buddhi, it is part of drishya. Because you can see your mind, right? You can see what you are thinking. Now this buddhi, what this buddhi does, it is the most intimate with the Purusha. There is the Purusha. Purusha's immediate proximity is buddhi. For buddhi to function, it needs manas. Manas functions through the sense organs. Sense organs function through sense objects. You break any of these link, Purusha has no experience. Isn't it? When we are in deep sleep, what happens? Buddhi is not available. So since Buddhi is not available, Manas ceases to function. Mind is not functioning. When mind is not functioning, senses are not functioning. So whether sense objects are there or not, it becomes irrelevant to the Purusha who is sleeping. So all of these must be awake. And therefore Buddhi, what this Buddhi does is, it reflects the creation. In other words, Buddhi is the mirror into which the Purusha looks. So how does this Buddhi reveal? This Buddhi, using the contact, reflects the world with its own power. That is what is meant by Swami Shakti. So who is the Swami here? Purusha is the Swami. When you say there is a Swami, there must be a servant also, isn't it? Otherwise, what is the use of using the word master? So master is Purusha. Swa means the slave of Purusha or the servant of Purusha is Buddhi. As soon as we say Buddhi, it is Buddhi, Manas, Chitta, Ahankara, senses, sense objects and the world. And both of them will be actually interacting, this Samyoga. Now the question is, every unfoldment of the power of the Drishya will put to test the power of Purusha. So let us see how that happens. Only when there is cold and heat, Shita and Ushna, then only the Purusha can realize his Sahana Shakti, isn't it? When do you know you have got endurance? Endurance is tested when the challenge to your Sahana Shakti is there. So how do we go on increasing the threshold of the Purusha's endurance? The more and more severe the challenges that come from the world, the higher the endurance power of a Purusha when he has got the jnana. Otherwise he crumples. So in this fight, should Purusha win or should Drishya win? For Drishya, there is no winning or losing. Why? Because it is inert. The winning and losing happens to the Purusha only. So what does this conclude? Purusha has to use the Buddhi Shakti. So Purusha is the Lord of the Buddhi. He is employing Buddhi for his use, and he has to actually discover his true nature, and that is not possible unless he contacts the Buddhi. So the sutra is saying, Swarupa Upalabdhi Hetuhu. Hetuhu means cause, reason, for the reason of discovering its own nature. Purusha, to discover one's own nature, Prakriti or the world is essential. That is why Ishvara actually established the Drishya. And if the Drishya was constantly changing, then what happens in this matrix? There will be no totality of confusion. And therefore all the avidya, the ignorance, got embedded only in the Purusha, and they made the Prakriti as completely static. And the Trigunas are expressed through the Buddhi. So using this Buddhi Shakti, the Lord of the Buddhi discovers his own power through contact or samyoga. So what is the purpose of Buddhi? Why should we have intellect? Here, the purpose of Buddhi Shakti is to give experience to Purusha. That's all. What is the experience? The Buddhi simply shows the world as a reflection. Today it is very cold, today it is very hot. And then it will challenge the Sahana Shakti of the Purusha. Or when you are enjoying, or when you are experiencing, the Buddhi shows the bhoga or the experience to the Purusha. Then when that happens, the Purusha discovers how powerful he is. He has to. That's where dhyana comes. If he does not, he will crumble. Therefore, Purusha, to realize his power, to get liberation, contacts Buddhi. A Purusha who is full of avidya or ignorance will fail to see his power when he contacts Buddhi merely for bhoga of the world. That is the reason why this samyoga is created. If the samyoga is, or the contact of the Purusha is caused by ignorance, then what happens? Sukha dukkha is experienced. If Purusha connects with the samyoga, if it is done with discrimination, viveka, vairagya occurs. Now for the Yoga Sutra metaphysics, it is very, very essential that there is different Purushas the Purushas are different and they are unique to each jiva. Otherwise, the problem occurs that if there is only one Purusha, if one Purusha is liberated, the whole universe must get liberated. Since it does not happen, Yoga Sutra metaphysics says that there are multiple Purushas and each one of them in their own way contact the world and in their own way experience Sukha Dukkha. We have to see an illustration to understand this. A person who sees the universe with aviveka, indiscriminate, or with a person who sees the world with viveka. Let's go to Ramayana. In the Ayodhya Kanda, there is a prasanga. The prasanga is Rama Pattabhisheka is determined. So Rama Pattabhisheka is an event happening in the drishya, isn't it? Then how many drashtas are there? The seers are there. Main characters of who you see here is, there is Mantara, there is Kaikeyi, there is Kausalya, Sumitra, Lakshmana, Sita, all of them are there. Rama, of course, is there. So now, Pattabhisheka, as soon as Pattabhisheka is announced, the whole of Ayodhya is decked up in the middle of the night. Nobody is sleeping. The citizens of Ayodhya are not sleeping. Everybody is decked up in beautiful silks and they are all the whole town is ablaze with lights and people are going from here and there. And Mantara, Yadrichaya, that's what Ramayana says, just as an accident, she goes and climbs up the top stairs floor of Kaikeyi's palace and she looks around and says, what is going on? What's all happening here? How does Mantara see the drishya? The Purusha in Mantara contacts the Buddhi, her Buddhi. In her Buddhi, Ayodhya decked up is reflected. And Mantara's Purusha looks in the mirror of the Buddhi, the reflection of the world, and then she asks why this is happening. So the question that Mantara asks of Kausalya's servant, what is happening here, is samyoga. See, that is where we have to connect these technical terms. If Mantra has simply observed the decoration of the Ayodhya and then say, oh, something is going on. See, she is a servant. She look at her intellectual level. She would say, oh, somebody is celebrating something. You become indifferent. There is no samyoga. As soon as she asks the question, what is happening, that means she is engaging with the drishya. Samyoga. That happened through the reflection in the mirror of buddhi. So as soon as this happened, series of events took place. Now, Rama's buddhi is reflecting just everything, but Rama himself has not done any samyoga. Because the maximum samyoga he has got is, okay, I am going to get coronated, that's it. So he goes into his chambers and he will start doing prayers. Actually, he will be doing a puja in anticipation of tomorrow's coronation. In the meanwhile, things changed. When these things changed, now you look at the whole situation. Manthara goes and talks to Kaikeyi. Kaikeyi is lying on her bed. She has actually not gone out and seen outside what festivities are taking place. But this drishya called Manthara comes into the drashta called Kaikeyi, and whatever coloration that Manthara gives is reflected in the buddhi of Kaikeyi. So how does Kaikeyi do samyoga with the world? Now she does the samyoga beginning with, she is ecstatic that Rama is getting coronated. Then the trigunas of the buddhi of Manthara colors the triguna of the buddhi of Kaikeyi and corrupts it. So that corruption took place. And that transferred to Dasharatha, that transferred to Kausalya, that transferred to Sumitra, that transferred to Lakshmana, that transferred to Sita. Every buddhi got, every one of the buddhi through the samyoga of the drishya, each one of them reacted differently. But here we have a liberated Purusha. This liberated Purusha, how does he Shakti, Swashakti, Swaswami Shaktyoho. Look at this mantra. Look at this sutra. Swaswami Shaktyoho Sarupa Labdhetuhu Drishyam. Here the Purusha Shakti of Rama is fully expressed. How does he express? Mantra ignores. Whatever Manthara did, that is how he gains dominance over Manthara's attitude by becoming more powerful than the Drishya Shakti. The Drashta Shakti became more powerful, so he ignores. He pleases Kaikeyi by accepting to go to the forest. He submits to Dasharatha's predicament. And then he convinces Kausalya and Sumitra why he has to go to the forest. And he makes Lakshmana and Sita accompany him. Look, same buddhi, same Shakti, same Drishya. Drishya is same, isn't it? Who has demonstrated the Purusha Shakti? Rama has demonstrated the Purusha Shakti. We would never have known the Purusha Shakti of Rama unless he had come into Samyoga with the Drishya, isn't it? So look at this. Patanjali Maharshi says, Swaswama Shaktyoho Sarupopalabdhihi Samyoga Hetuhu. So this brings us a very, very important point that in all the iterations of our experience, when the Purusha Shakti is dominant, then the same Buddhi and its derivatives, that is Antakarana, Deha, Manasu, Indriya, Tanmatras, Prapancha, all of them will fall in line with the power of the Buddhi and their power of the Purusha. When that happens, then Rama, in all these circumstances, has no frustration. So the lack of frustration of Sri Ramachandra, where is it reflected? In the mirror of Buddhi, isn't it? Therefore, Buddhi becomes the critical component in either the bondage for the Purusha or for the liberation of the Purusha. Now, what is the relationship between Purusha and Buddhi? Purusha is the Swami, he is the owner, and he owns Buddhi. Now, why do Buddhi and Purusha come together, the Samyoga? Why do they come together? It is because Buddhi has to realize its own nature, and then its own Swarupa it has to achieve. What is its own Swarupa? Buddhi's ultimate Swarupa is Viveka, discrimination. And therefore, every Sukha Dukkha that the Buddhi reflects to the Purusha is where the Buddhi is trying to liberate itself from the dualities. Because duality is experienced in Buddhi. And in consequence, what happens is the Purusha, as he modifies the reflection of the Buddhi, then he will also get the Swarupopalabdhi. So for Buddhi to realize the nature, its own Swarupopalabdhi, it contacts and does the Samyoga, and this Samyoga, Buddhi, the purpose of the Drishya or the Buddhi can be either used for enjoyment or it can be used for liberation. This is where the power of the Purusha has to be exercised. So this is another metaphor will help us. So you have in your bedroom, you have got a life-size mirror. So you go and stand in front of that mirror, and then you want to dress up. What does the mirror reflect? It reflects not only you, but it reflects all the objects which is all within the range of its reflection, isn't it? So you come and stand before the mirror, and then you suddenly discover you are not made your bed. So what is the purpose for which I came and stood before the mirror? I wanted to get ready, but I see that the bed is not made. So immediately the Buddhi gets disturbed. I have not made the bed. So you give up your project of looking at the mirror to get ready, you go and try to fix the bed. So you can extrapolate this simple example of how all the time, while the Purusha is trying to express his power of control on the Buddhi, which is you go and stand in front of the mirror to get ready, the Buddhi is constantly reflecting other things which cause the dualities. Then when these dualities are caused, immediately the Purusha gets disturbed, and then he wants to fix all those dualities. And therefore the quality of the Samyoga changes. And for this quality of the Samyoga, Patanjali Maharshi calls it as Shakti Samyoga. It is not direct physical contact. Because Purusha cannot have a direct contact with the world, just like I have physical contact with my cell phone. I can feel the touch, I can feel the the experience of holding the phone. Its weight. All these things I can experience. Purusha does not experience the world like that. The Purusha's experience of the world is only through the reflection of the Buddhi. So whatever the Buddhi reflects is what the Purusha sees. That is how the Buddhi shows its dominance on Purusha. That's why the sutra says, Swaswami Shaktyoho. Swami tries to exercise his Shakti, and the servant also exercises his Shakti. The Buddhi exercises his Shakti just like your mirror reflects everything that is in front of you, not just you, everything that is there surrounding you. And now, without the mirror, suppose Buddhi was not there, without the mirror, no reflection is possible. Without the form in front of it, also there is no reflection. Buddhi may be there, there is no reflection. So the world has to be there. The mirror is Buddhi. It has to display the world. And when this displays the world, suppose you stand in front of the mirror, you are getting ready. You do recognize that the bed is not made. But then you say, I am standing here for the project of getting ready. And you suspend the distraction of having to make the bed. Then the Purusha has taken charge. This is Vairagya. What the world, the Buddhi is constantly reflecting the universe, the world all the time. Whether you will be carried away by that reflection or not is how a Purusha shows his power. This brings us to another profound question. What compels us to see the objects? What was the compulsion for you to see the unmade bed in the reflection of the mirror that you are standing in front of? What was the compulsion? Even though your intention was just to go get dressed. That question in the next sutra, 224, Patanjali answers, Tasya hetur avidya. This weakening of the Purusha in these reflections is because of avidya, the association of Buddhi and Purusha, or Drishya and Drishya, though Drishya is static. Purusha has got avidya. Now you see, where is avidya? In some of the schools they say avidya is located in the Buddhi. Yoga Sutra school says Buddhi is inert. How can it have any vidya or avidya? Avidya is in the Purusha, in the particular Purusha. And therefore, let us look at an example of how this happens. Say there is a stump of a tree. This stump of a tree, whatever is the time of the day, whether it is daylight, dusk, dawn, whenever it is, it remains a stump, isn't it? But a person looks at it in the dusk, and this person thinks that it is a man standing. Then another person thinks that it is a ghost. Then a third person looks at it and then he knows that it is a stump of a tree. As long as this difference of observation from one person to another person is there, a specific Purusha creates a specific Samyoga. This Samyoga is specific because of the degree of avidya in that particular Purusha. The Purusha who sees the stump as a stump, there is no avidya with regard to the stump. There is one distortion for one who sees the stump as a man. Another distortion for one who sees the stump as a ghost. And this we have already seen. Patanjali Maharshi calls it as Viparyayaha. So what is viparyaya? Viparyaya is error. See, you remember, you read this sutra with the chapter 1, sutra number 8. Chapter 1, sutra number 8 says, Viparyayaha mithyajnanam atadrupa pratishtham. That means error is false knowledge stemming from incorrect comprehension. So whatever is reflected in the buddhi is correctly or incorrectly comprehended by the Purusha. And therefore, what does he do? Read again this sutra with 2.5. Anitya ashuchi dukkha anatmasu nitya shuchi sukha atmakhyati avidya. All this is happening because of a viparyaya, because of a confusion that something which is impermanent is seen as permanent, something which is unclean is seen as clean and pure. A dukkha is understood as a sukha, and the non-self is understood as a self, and this is avidya. So 3 sutras we have to study simultaneously: the viparyaya of the first chapter, the Anitya Anatmasu 2.5, and this sutra has to be seen. Okay. Question. The person mistakes the tree stump as a man, another person sees it as a ghost. How do you explain this? This can be explained only because of the difference in the perceptions of the Purushas. And another thing is, those who look at this with the viparyaya, everybody's viparyaya disappears at daylight. Tomorrow morning, daylight comes. The one who thought it was a man, one who thought it was a ghost, for both of them also, this viparyaya will disappear. That means every single Purusha, when he takes charge of the drishya and how he interprets the drishya, can be liberated. So liberation is not the prerogative of the chosen few. But the question is, the kleshas, asmita, ragadvesha, abhinivesha does not disappear easily. In spite of all this knowledge, it does not disappear. Why? Because this avidya is deep rooted. Unlike the simplistic example I gave of the stump of the tree, very quickly the confusion is removed in daylight. All that we have to do is wait for 8, 10 hours, 12 hours, that's all. Is avidya also like that? Is the scripture says, avidya is deep rooted, therefore tasya hetuhu viparyaha, he did not write. If it was false knowledge, then how should we frame this sutra? The cause for drishya samyoga is because of viparyaya, he could have said. Why Patanjali said avidya? Viparyaya is part of avidya, but avidya is not part of viparyaya. Because viparyaya is not carried from janma to janma. How? The viparyaya that it is a stump or a ghost is not carried to the next daylight. Next daylight, tonight is one janma, tomorrow morning is another janma. So it does not transfer to another janma. But whereas avidya transfer from janma to janma to janma. Therefore, this is actually called as viparyaya jnana vasana. This confused jnana itself becomes a trace in the mind of the person, in the Purusha. So therefore he will cling on to his ego. I must cling on to the asmita. I must cling on to myself. Otherwise, my identity will be lost. However number of times I have heard Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu, however 1,000 times I have read the Gita, anybody who is born must die. I cannot get rid of the klesha of death. I cannot get the abhinivesha that I should not die. And that is why Patanjali Maharshi uses the word avidya, and he calls it as the vasana remains all the time in the Purusha's chitta, even at the time of pralaya. The whole universe will dissolve into the black hole. Even then, this confusion will not disappear. So what happens? This creation uses the customized viparyaya jnana vasana and gives a customized buddhi in the next janma. In other words, in our janma, what we have acquired, the Purusha samyoga with the buddhi, we have come together, is customized based on how much of erroneous knowledge we had in janma to janma to janma. I heard a story. I do not know how true is the story, but the story is interesting. It appears there was one tennis player in UK called Jem Gilbert. Young girl, very good tennis player. Her mother once gets toothache, severe toothache. You know how terrible it is when a person gets toothache. You must immediately run to the dentist. So Jem takes her mother to the dentist, and the dentist examines. Says, there is maybe it's a root canal, or maybe a tooth has to be extracted. It is very simple. The doctor comes out and tells Jem, we have to do a very minor surgery. It takes no more than about half an hour. She will be fine, and then you just wait in the lounge. We'll take care of her. The mother did not come out even after 2 hours. There was a frantic flurry of activities, doctors and nurses darting in and out of the office that her mother was there. And after a couple of hours, the doctor comes out and then he says, I'm extremely sorry. We did everything we could, but your mother died of heart attack when she was sitting on the chair. Grief-stricken, loss of mother, but life goes on. A few years later, Jem, probably in her about 8:30, developed toothache. So she goes to the dentist. She could not bear the pain, obviously, and the dentist said, there is a very small minor surgery we have got to do. Then in about half an hour you should be fine. But for her, she had viparyaya jnana vasana. She sits on the dentist. Nothing was wrong with her except a minor extraction or a minor root canal to be done. She collapsed and died. Why? Viparyaya jnana vasana. Anyone who has got toothache and goes to the dentist says a minor surgery is required, dies of heart attack. So what is the cause of this viparya jnana vasana? It is avidya, isn't it? This is the reason why we have seen hypochondriacs who read the internet and then they go on looking at the symptoms of different diseases and they will say, all those diseases I have got. Viparya jnana vasana. How to deal with these situations? For that, yoga is saying intelligent engagement with all experiences. One situation, however logical it may be, however logically it might have concluded, need not necessarily conclude in the same way again. We can only see trends. Avuna Rao garu, whatever data we have got, what does it tell? It only tells trends. It cannot say this is what is going to happen. So what should be the Purusha Shakti? Purusha Shakti must become adaptable to possibilities of changes. This is what Yoga Sutra calls it as Viveka Khyatihi. Knowledge arising out of discrimination. What does this discriminative knowledge do? Yoga Shastra says it reveals the Chitta Vritti. It reveals the Chitta Vritti of Viparyaya. Every time Buddhi presents the world to us, Purusha must exercise his Shakti and then evaluate what have you reflected. Have you reflected accurately? Then what happens? The Viparyaya Vritti is replaced by Viveka Vritti. Who replaces it? Purusha replaces it. That is why the root of all problems is avidya. And avidya stems from our observing the universe as presented by buddhi. Because buddhi is trying to project its power, Purusha pauses and evaluates what the buddhi has reflected and exercises viveka. This avidya is one of the important concepts, extremely important concept for understanding any philosophy. It has been examined by every philosophical tradition. Avidya has been linked with the Karana Sharira in Vedanta, corresponding to Maya of Karana Prapancha. Yoga Sutra seems to have a much more logical, understandable explanation of avidya. It is a mithya jnana, that is a wrong understanding that has come and coupled with the absence of the swarupa jnana of Purusha, absence of its own nature of the Purusha, that Purusha is actually completely pure, shuddha, not bound, muktaha, and he is of consciousness, buddha, shuddha, bhugda, mukta, swarupaha, purushaha. When the Purusha can do that, avidya is gone. That means whatever is reflected in the mirror, the Purusha should not jump to conclusion because it is presented in that way. So what is the avidya? How does it cause? It creates parichinna bhava. Parichinna bhava means I am different, the world, some others are different. That is parichinna bhava. And because there is this parichinna bhava, there is all kinds of transactions. And the transactions generate desire, kama. Kama desires action, karma. Karma gives rise to karma phala. So if avidya is dealt with by Purusha, Shuddha Kama can be developed. Shuddha Kama creates Shuddha Karma creates Shuddha Karma Phala. So that is where Yama Niyama Asana Ashtanga Yoga comes into play. And also we should know that whatever is reflected in the mirror, suppose the unmade bed or the dust on the mirror is not a dust on the seer, isn't it? So avidya, ignorance, sets a chain reaction. First thing it does is it will create differences. Whenever there is differences, there is samsara. Whenever there is samsara, our conception of what an individual is. What is an individual? Vak, manas and prana. My speech, my mind and my individuality. And this gives rise to antakarana. And the antakarana will create karya, karana, and it will also create nama rupa. It will create differences between one jiva and another jiva. And this has been their beginningless time. And that is why even in pralaya, our avidya will not go unless we work on the avidya. So that's where Patanjali Maharishi is creating. He creates the metaphysics. And in this metaphysics, he says here the buddhi is the only thing that Purusha has got access to. And buddhi has access to the emotion. Whatever the emotion presents, buddhi reflects. And therefore, the Purusha must view the reflection of the world that is happening in his buddhi with the viveka. And when he does that, slowly he can chip away at the avidya. Quite a heavy subject. But then, of course, unless this metaphysics is built, we cannot justify why we should do yoga, why Ashtanga yoga is required, why ethics is required. Basically, why ethical living is required. A lot of times we decide that, I have to be ethical to bless the world. We don't have to bless the world. We live ethically to bless ourselves. I tell the truth to bless myself. I pray to bless myself. So this is the process of using whatever the drishya is presented and using the viveka or the viveka khyati. So in Vedanta, once avidya is gone, a person is liberated. But in Yoga Sutra, just because avidya goes, viveka khyati comes. But viveka khyati, when viveka khyati comes, what happens? Chittavritti will change. And when the chittavritti nirodha takes place, then the person establishes there is more steps in Yoga Shastra to reach liberation than you would see in Vedantic practice. And therefore it becomes inevitable that the series of practices have to be established. Because the world is, as we say, we should not forget the world is as it is. But how we relate with the world has to change. And therefore, practice is for me to do yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dhyana, dharana, samadhi, so that I train my Purusha with buddhi, because buddhi can express its power. Swaswami shaktyoho. So we empower the buddhi, which is more accessible to us. So we empower the buddhi to change the Purusha. And for that we have to go for the training of the buddhi, which will be the subject matter, upcoming subject matter in our next classes.